Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content and is recorded in advance. The following episode was originally recorded on August 1st, 2021. Listener discretion is advised.
So you were in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah?
Were you in the shit?
Yeah, I was in the shit.
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me, I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome once again to the New Way podcast, where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. I'm your host, Matt Shank, joined by my co-host, Mr. Benjamin Scott Wilson.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi. And what a high we are coming off of. We have just returned freshly from the movie theater once again with a hot take review for you that ties into our topic.
This is the second time we've done this, and I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of enjoying this little flow that we've got going for our old-fashioned episodes, where it's just the two of us.
Just two of us.
Just two dicks in a studio.
And you know, your wife chimed in, and what she thinks when it's just us?
It was all right.
And that's she likes the whole crew. She likes the whole crew.
I like the whole crew too.
It's true. Before we get into our topic and our review of the movie, I was talking to Ben earlier about this. I just started and finished Sweet Tooth on Netflix, and it's something I do want to do like a whole episode on. And I'd love to have some people chime in as well, because I think there's a really interesting thing. Sweet Tooth is based on a graphic novel from 2013, and they just started a new sequel run for it in November of last year. And so I watched the show, and then I kind of read the plot of the comic or of the graphic novel, and I much preferred what the show was. And I'm curious how often that actually happens with properties where whatever the first thing is you see, you tend to like that version better.
Gravitate towards that a little bit more.
So something I think we should, I'd love to cover. We've done adaptations before, but I don't think we've gone that angle. Really.
I don't think that obviously, like, for example, the book of Jurassic Park is way different than the movie.
Yes.
And I read the book after I saw the movie, and immediately was like, well, I kind of understood that they couldn't make a PG-13 family-friendly, franchisable movie out of that book.
Sure.
But, of course, I like the book a lot more.
Yeah.
And all the subsequent, stuff that followed it. But, so, I don't know if... I do think that there still are sometimes the rose-colored glasses that you get.
Yeah.
Where, you see something or you experience something for the first time, and you're like... you always associate it with kind of that experience... and because of that, you can kind of overlook maybe some, issues.
Well, yeah, and I think it's kind of, and it happens even in things that are popular or even more popular in their original form. But like for many people, and I include myself, and I love the performance of Alan Rickman in the Harry Potter movies, but he is categorically not the book version of that character.
Right.
He's way too cool and regal and Alan Rickman-y to pull off what that role in the books is, which was originally supposed to be Tim Roth, which makes much more sense for the books of this slimy, just not likable in any way character.
Yeah, something closer to Filch.
Yes, exactly. Like that, or I mean, nowadays it would be, Adam Driver would be another great kind of, a good Snape-ish kind of character, and that you just don't... something inherently kind of just dirty about them.
Adam Driver actually kind of is like less British Rickman.
He
2.0.
is. He's a little, but I could buy him more as like a creepy thing versus Rickman is a little just too fucking cool. But yeah, it's something interesting. I liked it overall, Sweet Tooth. And I think the changes they made, at least from what I saw and the little bit I've read of what happens in the graphic novel, I prefer.
great production design in that show.
Yes.
It's, I mean, some of the, I think that's the first thing I told Matt and Nick when I saw the pilot is I was like, it really feels very, I mean, and not saying it was a cheap show to make, but it does not, it feels, a lot of times people are like, when they're talking about these shows like Shadow and Bone and these other things like that, I feel like they still look kind of cheap. Whereas like Sweet Tooth was made for considerably less of a budget, but whoever did the production design and just sort of the overall world building of that, and then just the direction within that world, it feels like a very high budget movie.
Yes,
a very long high budget movie.
And I think where you see that a lot is with the general premise of it is the idea that there are these hybrid children are animal human hybrids, or sometimes more human, sometimes more animal, but they do a really good job of mixing practical effects and CGI. I think there's a lot more CGI hidden in there than is even kind of quite noticeable upon a first viewing, but they do a really good job of blending that in, which makes it feel, I think it's something that you respond to it in our age group, is that it feels more kind of like our childhood movies a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only other thing I had is I finally caught up on all of the Marvel making ofs, which are just phenomenally well done.
I haven't seen the most recent one. So.
I had not watched the one for Falcon and Winter Soldier. Watched that, and I watched the Loki one. I loved the director. It's a British woman who directed the series of Loki. And she's talking about the time void, the last location they get to before they go into the Kang's place. And she's like, yeah, I had this whole like pitch for it and this idea of these gray skies and these green fields. And then we got on set and we looked at the production design. And she goes, oh, I recreated England. It's just England. I didn't realize it, but I just basically made England. Jury skies, lots of green fields. Oh, great. I've really done it this time.
Right.
Which I thought was hugely funny to me. But I'm curious to see where Marvel and Disney goes. Ben, do you have any opinion on the Black Widow movie making, money making side of things that's going on with for those of you, in case you don't know out there, there's kind of a battle right now.
Well, and who knows? I mean, this might air in a few weeks.
This is true, yeah.
We never know when this is going to air. But yeah, so Scarlett Johansson sued Disney, and then immediately after, Gerard Butler was like, I'm getting in on that, and he sued whoever it was produces the Olympus Has
from 2013
the Has Fallen franchise, because they say that they reported under gross or something like that, and they gave like studio execs $8 million worth of bonuses that should have gone to the total gross.
Well, and there's also, I mean, and that's something that studios have been doing for a long time.
Oh,
You take your points deal, and then it's like, well, you get points after we pay off all of these other things, and a lot of people have gotten screwed. But the two big ones that are happening, and I'm glad it is finally, becoming more in the forefront, but John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are having a similar, almost the exact same lawsuit issue with the company that did A Quiet Place 2, which is basically saying, we took lesser salaries in order to get points on the back end, and the points are based on box office, and then there are all of these bonuses based on different tiers and levels in the box office.
The metrics of how it performs.
Yes.
But like we're in an unprecedented time, so you never know. I mean, the paradigm of that being delivered on streaming and having that not count against, like basically like all of that shit needs to count. That's basically what needs to happen.
Well, and I think it is counting. It's just counting in a very different way.
It counts in a different way, yeah.
And it's it's just you're getting
it aggregates in a different way. I mean, that's what the deal is. Is like
Well, I was mostly not surprised isn't the right word, but so Disney has a massive PR department and machine,
sure.
And there are people upon people upon people handling that, and their response. The angle they took was maybe the most nearsighted angle, which was basically they blamed it on Scarlett Johansson being callous about COVID, and I was like, guys, like that really, like that was the best in a room of people making all of the money that Scarlett Johansson didn't make are sitting there, and that was their best response. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it was such a bad response that even Feige came out and was just like, this is bullshit. Like, and that's kind of interesting when mommy and daddy are fighting behind the scenes on that stuff. So that's where I'm mostly curious to see where this kind of winds up between Feige and
people are going to kiss and make up at some point.
Sure.
I honestly, I don't think it's Marvel as much as it is Disney.
Yes, I agree.
Because Disney is the one who ultimately is in charge of actually releasing the stuff, everything.
Yes.
I mean, that's the distribution deal that they have with Marvel. Marvel produces the films, and then Disney does what they want with them, essentially. Which is, they treat you like the good whore you are.
God. Reason 107 why we will never have anyone related to Disney, Marvel, and especially Jon Favreau ever on the podcast.
I guarantee you that probably about 47,000 Disney employees have said something way worse than that on the record.
That is entirely true. But yeah, let's dive into our topic. So we went and saw a new film called The Green Knight that Ben has been incredibly excited about for some time now.
Yes, I have been. And the reason why I was excited, like I told Matt, which is just funny, I could tell it was kind of palpable. Like I was like, I really want to see this on the big screen. I talked about it on the podcast before. That the director David Lowery is really unique in that all of his films have a barometer of quality that is unusually high. And none of his films are alike in any way, shape, or form. He's the director of Ain't Them Body Saints. This is, I think, in order. Ain't Them Body Saints, Pete's Dragon, A Ghost Story with Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck, Old Man and the Gun, and now The Green Knight. And those are all wildly divergent movies, but are all very kind of high quality, very interesting films kind of within their respective genres.
And he's in, I didn't know this, but he's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh.
And born 1 year after me. A Milwaukee boy, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if he and Kep ever ran in some similar circles in their time.
I think Kep's a little bit older.
A little bit more.
But so I've been really interested ever since it was like a year and a half ago. I mean, they pulled like a Ghostbusters. Like a year and a half ago, they released a very short teaser trailer for it, like a 50-second teaser trailer with a bunch of really pretty looking shots, essentially. And it was supposed to come out in June of 2020. And then as soon as COVID happened, they immediately pulled it, and it's basically just been sitting on the shelf. And they finally released it here in towards the end of July in 2021.
So what's your general? Well, we should also preface this that we went to a theater that only had 4 other people in it, but 2 of them made enough ruckus to almost cause.
Oh no, there were 3 of them. There was a dog too. There was a growling dog. There was a guy who was 4-way FaceTiming during the movie with, I'm assuming it's his grandkids. I think there was another dog there too. So he was FaceTiming with 2 grandkids. So him and the dog were FaceTiming with a dog and 2 grandkids during the movie. That was just super entertaining, especially when you're really trying to get immersed in a super, atmospheric, film.
Well, there are opening lines to the movie that are basically sort of a poem. I guess kind of this ring. I wouldn't know because they were already.
Yeah, I was just like, what the fuck is this saying?
Like, blah, 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 and his phone is on, so I get this bright fucking light
and it's ringing every fucking 10 minutes.
Like also like they're old, so the phone is on brightness 100, like out of 10. Yeah. It is the brightest fucking thing. It's the sun staring at me, and then so and the movie ends.
It's on a scale of 1 to Alan Wake's flashlight. It was Alan Wake's flashlight.
The movie ends, and the gentleman and his heavily Botoxed wife stand up, and he turns around to me and goes, well, did you like it?
Did you like it?
And I was like, yeah, I thought it was pretty good. He goes, you think this is a good movie? He goes, I go, yeah, I do. And he goes, okay. And then he's like walking out of the theater, and he's like, I got to go to the bathroom and throw up. And I'm like, You thought the movie was so bad you're going to throw up? I've never seen a movie I thought was so. I've seen some bad movies. I saw
if Trash Humpers isn't going to make you throw up, then nothing will.
I saw that softcore porno that Ben assigned to me because his film school teacher edited it or whatever it was. The Take Me Home Tonight. What was that called?
Choose Me.
Choose Me.
Yeah, and that was Richard Portman that did the sound in that movie.
And
Get it right.
I barely threw up. I mean, just a tiny
just
bit.
a little bit in your
but,
mouth.
Like not. I threw up in my pants during that one scene. But it's just a little bit. It was just a little bit. So it's also like of all the movies to have people like this in. This is a very tonally
it's
wild movie that is like Guillermo del Toro meets Gilliam done by A24.
I felt a lot of kind of there was definitely I felt like there was some like Ari Aster type of influence in there.
Yes.
That there felt like honestly, it was funny that you brought up after walking out of the theater, Matt. I said I wanted to save it and talk about it on the podcast, but there is some Denis Villeneuve kind of feeling sort of in there as well. Really interesting episodic movie. Obviously, it kind of takes the main character, and we'll get into this a little bit because Matt hasn't said. If you haven't seen the title of today's episode, we're talking about legends.
Yes.
And films based on legends, of which the Green Knight is Sir Gawain, part of the Arthurian legend, or a subsection of the Arthurian legend. And so it definitely felt like a hero's journey, like the Odyssean journey, but the dark side of it, like the flip, like the tail side of where it was almost like Heart of Darkness meets the Odyssean journey, where it's like every single thing is making him less pure.
Yes.
As he moves through it, and then it has a great reveal at the end, which, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I think there's also just a lot of interpretation and what is actually happening in this. And so for me, it was interesting. Is Ben has been talking about this movie for a long time. I watched one of the trailers once a while ago and then promptly forgot pretty much, other than it was Dev Patel and it was Sir Gawain. Like that was the only thing I knew about it going in. So I was not prepared for exactly the journey that it went on, and it took me a while
to get used to it,
to settle in. But I also feel that the movie tonally wasn't quite sure for certain bits of it exactly what line they were, because there are a couple of very bold choices that are made early on.
I think it feels very intentional to me.
Yes, I feel like sometimes it was leaning harder into that Gilliam vibe than it was other times where it was more Del Toro, which I felt were kind of a little bit conflicting, because there is some humor in it, and I feel that there's actually, they wanted it to be more humorous than necessarily I think it actually winds up being, because there's this so one of the devices they use in it that kind of threw me off is they have these they're basically titles cards that are different sections of it, but they pop up especially in the beginning, in very weird places, in very weird edits, and that it's
intentionally off-putting.
Yes, it worked for me. It worked better going. And there's another director that I wanted to throw in the mix of what it reminded me of. And I apologize, I forget his name. You might remember, that directed The Lobster and The Favorite.
Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. It'll hit me like a time break in just 1 second. I
can look it up, but
no. Oh, God damn it! It's one of those things that I could have told you his name if you hadn't asked it. But no, I very, very much. I mean, obviously, without all of the kind of the trappings.
Yorgos Lanthimos. Yes.
Lanthimos. So, anyways, I think I had more of an expectation of that. Like that it was, people had said it's weird. It takes a very interesting turns, and it is very episodic. And parts of the movie don't feel like other parts of the movie, but I think that's also the kind of hero's journey part of it. And like I said, I wasn't really expecting the full-on hero's journey, but I was expecting weirdness. And so, because people basically said, hey, this marches to the beat of its own drum. It is nothing if not singularly unique. Even we're saying it's like a lot of these other movies, but it's really not a whole lot like these other movies.
It is this hodgepodge of all of it. And I think one of the things that I really responded to that I liked is that it's one of the first times I've seen it done with this type of material. But there's a very popular genre that I am a huge fan of, which is essentially, I'll call it the Alice in Wonderland genre, which is it's Alice in Wonderland, it's Wizard of Oz, it's Labyrinth, it's Mirror Mask. There's a whole series of movies that are about usually a young girl who finds herself in a fantastical kind of journey that has to come to some kind of realization or moment towards the end. But it's all of these disparate moments that are happening that each are representing either it's puberty. I mean, almost all of those movies are essentially about it. Pan's Labyrinth is another one that this is very, very feels a lot like, very much like Pan's Labyrinth. But I think that's interesting because normally it is not done with a young adult male character, even though it is somewhat similar of him finding his way. And I was also trying to figure out if all of these different interactions he's having, are those the different, I know there are the 5 virtues of a knight. I don't remember what they are, or is it the 7 deadly sins, or is it, I think there's
it's
something
the 5
with
virtues of a knight.
The 5 virtues of a knight. So which I don't know off the top of my head what those are or how they line up
it's
with
like
each
purity,
of the bits.
chivalry. I mean, but anyways, so they anyways, I really I expected to like the movie, and I did. I wasn't disappointed by it.
You
at
didn't
all.
answer when the guy asked if you liked it, though. So I was
Because I wasn't going to engage that guy in any conversation. If I did, I was likely going to kick their dog on the way out of the theater. So, and I do.
That poor dog. I feel
Yeah.
sorry for the dog.
I know. I'm joking. I would never hurt an animal. I would hurt them though. I would hurt them and then steal the
then
animal.
steal the dog.
Raise it right. But no, it was pretty. It was a very pretty movie. It was very interesting. I thought it was very strongly acted. I loved some of the choices that were made. Like I said, to me, it felt very intentional. Like it walks that line where a lot of people could easily say it's very pretentious.
Sure.
But it felt intentional enough to me that he was going for a very discombobulating effect, especially with like the titles and things like that.
Yeah.
And ultimately the movie is very disorienting, which I think is the point. It does feel kind of like this sort of spiral into madness. But what I really loved were the last 15 minutes. If you noticed, not a single line of dialogue. Last 15 minutes. Whereas I feel like, like movies like There Will Be Blood, there's a beautiful 24-minute opening sequence that doesn't have a word of dialogue, and it perfectly kind of opens that story. It's one of my favorite parts of that. I've heard that Pig, the new Nicolas Cage film, is also very similar to that, has a beautiful like opening sequence, not quite that long, but where there's not a word spoken and kind of establishes the story. But in this case, it does it at the end. And it does it so you can get your, like, basically hear the results of the hero's journey or the anti-hero's journey that you have watched previously, and here's what happens because of that journey. And I thought that was a really cool way to wrap it up, because I was interested, and I was like, how are you going to end this movie? And it was wholly satisfying. Like, because that's the thing is, I agree with you that there were parts where it felt definitely uneven, even though I feel like it was intentional. It's not a movie for everybody.
Yeah.
and not everybody's going to like love it or, go bananas for it. But I feel like that the conclusion is wholly satisfying.
Yeah, and I think it is definitely one of those movies that I would go back and watch it.
Totally.
Because there's a lot I think I'm missing.
I'll probably buy it.
Yeah, like because I think there's a lot. There's so much happening in the beginning, and especially as for me going in and not knowing that there was even any fantasy element to it, which is a huge part
There's
of it.
magic. There's
a lot of that.
There's fucking giants.
And there's a lot of like weird. There also was just some weird stuff happening in the opening shot of the movie that I was trying.
There was a fire in the background.
Yeah, and I was like trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. And there's these geese fighting with a goat, and I'm like, obviously this shit means something. I don't know what it means.
I mean,
I'm not savvy enough to know.
I'm definitely interested in going back and seeing it. But anyways, I think that was kind of what led me to say, hey, how about we talk about like movies about legends? And I think we should kick it off with kind of the Arthurian legend, because fuck me. I mean, there are so many Arthur movies or things about Arthur movies or derivations of Arthur movies. The Arthurian legend is kind of, I mean, it's kind of all over the place. It's not even singularly, North European. I mean, like
Sure.
it goes all over the world. The same type of that kind of Arthurian legend.
Well, I want to take half a step back before we do that, because I was kind of interested in how we were going to categorize some of these things and kind of figure them out. And I want to get into you're starting exactly where I had on here.
Let me dictate the flow of this conversation. God damn it. No. So I understand.
I wrote down 6 subsections of legends, right? So you've got creature myths, you've got myths rooted in actual history, you've got fairy tales, you've got general hero's journey. That's sort of a cheat, but it seems like a lot of them are very hero-ish things. You've got gods, which I'm going to include the Bible in that as mythology as well. I know that's Nick.
Jesus was pretty legendary.
Somewhere Nick just got very excited that I called the Bible mythology, and then actual urban legends. So our Arthurian, I think it really is almost its own subsection. And what's kind of interesting with Arthur is that everyone knows the bare bones enough, which is why I think it's used so often, is that there are so many different classic stories that can be told with it, whether it's the Lancelot, Arthur, Guinevere love triangle, whether it's Merlin and that kind of shit.
The reason why I think that it's kind of all encompassing, where you get so many different sort of legendary quote unquote tales from the Arthurian legend, is because the legend of Arthur, if you look at sort of the comprehensive history or the building of the mythology of that legend, it's pretty crazy how broad it is. Because first you have the trappings of a king who was born, who does not know he's king, and rises to power because of his ability or his birthright. That is essentially magically, possessed. Given with the
once and future king. So it's so many different heroes' journeys. So that's it's the Luke Skywalker,
of course,
Harry Potter,
it's all over the place like that. Then you have sort of the forbidden love angle of the noble and the king and the nobleman and the wife and the love triangle and the nobility sort of thing, which is permeated pop culture forever. I mean,
it's just like Ben and Beth and me. Like, we're just very, I'm very Lancelot-esque.
Yeah. The late 90s Ben Stiller, Edward Norton vehicle, Keeping the Faith, Arthurian Journey.
God, I love that movie.
It's a good movie. But anyways, then you also have the whole portion of which is actually goes back to even there's some tendrils of other legends, Greek legends, or Greek mythology, where you have Arthur laying with his sister, who is disguised to give birth to the next king because he's unable to have a child. The child is then raised to kill the king. That is straight out of Greek mythology.
A little Oedipal-ish.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I forgot the actual name that actually happens in Greek mythology. That almost that exact scenario. So yeah, I feel like it's kind of just so big, and there's so many different things that happen. And then we're not even getting to like what the Green Knight was about, which was the hero's journey for one of the nights.
Yeah,
and they all had different journeys.
Well, and I love that there's just, you see all of the other knights, but the only one that gets any play whatsoever, which not even really knight, I assume it's supposed to be Merlin.
Merlin's
he's the wizard. And it's just two scenes where basically he's just kind of like feeling the room out and like basically giving Arthur the like something good is going to happen, something bad's going to happen.
Well, the reason why I think that I immediately knew it was Merlin is because in the first scene you'll see the light change, and when he stands, he like does something and the lights change. So it's like it looked like two like powers working against one another.
Well, so what happens? So there's a scene in the very beginning. We're not really spoiling anything. The Green Knight arrives in this at the Knights of the Round Table, and it's this imposing giant figure, and Arthur stands up to go there, and Merlin does. That's what I called he's feeling the room out. So Merlin does the is everything good with this guy? And Arthur looks at him, and Merlin's like, no, this guy's fucking it's bad. And it makes a red light. He's like, okay, now I know to be on the defensive because this is a bad person and not just a good guy that might look like a bad person. But yeah, I love that it's a very unspoken thing. He never says hey Merlin, what's going on? It's just you bring all of that as a viewer. Even a casual viewer is going to pick up on kind of those things, which makes it such an easy story to wrap in any different way. Which and I'm sort of surprised they haven't done the 10 Things I Hate About You version of Merlin, or have they?
I don't think so.
I think they've done young Merlin and stuff, but I don't think they've done hey, let's set the Knights of the Round Table in a high school and go brick 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah,
they've done the story.
It's funny enough. The Boy Who Would Be King, which recently came out, is a movie that I recommended multiple times, and I've talked about many times because I really like it. That was kind of a retconning of the Arthur. It is a direct play. Morgana is in it.
It's no kid in King Arthur's court, but it's
true.
Okay.
But what is, when it comes down to it?
Nothing.
But there are just so many, permutations of the Arthurian legend. And then just, with King Arthur movies, there were a lot of King Arthur movies. Although, as we discussed earlier, I still think the definitive one is Excalibur, 1981, John Borman, which was one of my favorite movies growing up. I think it was one of the first movies I saw that had boobs in it.
Look at that.
Yeah, imagine that.
Again, differences of Ben growing up and me growing up. Ben's first boobs are in Excalibur, and I'm watching Bachelor Party.
Well, I just remember also feeling very confused about Helen Mirren. I was like, she's bad, but she's got something going on.
I'm still confused about Helen Mirren.
Yeah, I know.
Every day.
But in 1981, Excalibur. She's got me tongue twisted, man. I'm going, geez.
Now, do you think there are more cinematic tellings of Arthur or Robin Hood?
I was going to ask you the same question.
I was going to look it up, but
I think there are probably more cinematic versions of Robin Hood.
That's insane to me.
Because if you think about it, there are so many Robin Hood in different contexts, like steal from the rich, give to the poor.
Yes.
It can be anybody who just wants to turn the system upside down, or anybody who's trying to be. Are they doing it for the money, or are they doing it for the? Runaway Jury is a fucking Robin Hood.
They're doing
movie.
it for the nookie. Is what you were looking for.
But no, I was Runaway Jury is that's a Robin Hood movie. There's so many different. Like I said, you can take the basis of that, where you have the evil sheriff, somebody who is there to oppress and to get their way, and having somebody who's they're doing the bad thing, but they're doing it for good. Hackers.
Well, it's how many actual just Robin Hoods have we had in our life? We've got Costner, you've got Cary Elwes,
you've got Errol Flynn. If you're going back in the day.
Well, I'm talking about literally movies that have come out since we were born.
Russell Crowe.
We've got
Taron Egerton.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So that's 4. You've got animated was a little before our time, but still you've got animated.
It's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, and there were 4 or 5 versions of Robin Hood that came out before we were, it's just every generation's always going to have a Robin Hood or 2. Or 3 or 4.
Every 5 to 10 years, there's a new Robin.
But then again, you just look at popular culture, like I said, movies or properties like Hackers or Runaway Jury or things like all of these things where it's basically the people are doing the bad thing, but they're doing it to do the good thing against the bad guys, and that's basically kind of the plot of your Robin Hood stuff. And so I feel like that's one of those legend. Again, it's a tenet of building a legend is that sort of template of saying you have a character that's doing the wrong thing for the right reasons against people who are bad.
Yes.
That's Robin Hood. And you can apply that to literally hundreds, if not thousands, of movies that have come out over the history of cinema that all have that kind of Robin Hood-esque, that Robin Hood-esque kind of slant to it.
Sure. Agreed.
So yeah, I think that those two legends also. I mean, and there are some stories that kind of borrow from both of those in some way, shape, or form. But kind of talking about Arthur or the Arthurian legend makes me want to get back to kind of the hero's journey, because I mean, ultimately the real start of it, I think, is Homer, is the Odyssey, is the Iliad. Talking about the hero's journey, which really applied a lot to the movie we just watched. It definitely was sort of a deconstruction of that to some degree, because a lot of people will say, you can watch a lot of films and people will say, oh yeah, it's the hero's journey. Like it's episodic. It's them going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, having to overcome these certain different struggles using different parts of their, whether it's their brain or their brawn or their wit in different ways to overcome things. And I think that's a legend that has just sort of built and built and built over history.
Well, and there are so many different ways that it's approached as well, whether it's an active hero, a reluctant hero, which is most often the one that is done. I kind of liked what Green Knight did, which is very much someone that wants to be a hero for no other reason than to be a hero,
but they don't want to go do all the stuff, all the trappings that make you a hero.
And they get caught in this loop of like, why are you doing this to become a knight? Why do you want to become a knight? Because I want to do these things, but why? Like, and they're all of these kind of like this circular logic of like, why am I actually fucking doing any of this? What does it matter?
Yeah, there was one line, and again, we're not going to spoil the movie too much or talk about it too much more, but there was one great line where Joel Edgerton, who plays just a very interesting character in it, asks him, he's like, why do you want to be a knight? And he's just like, for honor? And he goes, is that a question?
Great.
And it was a really great line delivery, a very kind of rapid fire. It was like, no, honor.
No, honor.
Yeah, honor, yeah. And that was for honor, for glory. And then it was a very kind of cute, astute conversation of like, is that what you really want? Like, what? I mean, what's this?
Well, I love. There's also another really good line in it, similarly, where because it happens a couple of times, but the one time that it's just so boldly said straight to the audience. But there's a scene with him and a woman that's asking him to perform a task, and he's like, "What's in it for me?" And she's like, you can't ask me that. Like, literally explaining the idea of selflessness to him as like, this is part of the hero's journey.
Why would you ask me
that? What the fuck is wrong with you? Do you not understand what this is? I thought that was fucking great.
Yeah. It was definitely kind of like a fourth wall, kind of like wink, wink, nod. We know what we're doing here. But anyways, yeah, I think when it comes down to sort of the man side of things, or to man and womankind, I see a lot of the basis, at least in sort of Western culture, based on sort of the Greek stuff, the Iliad, the Odyssey, getting into the Arthurian legend, some sort of kind of combination of those. Which actually, one of the things kind of led me to. This is sort of in that same vein is Beowulf.
Oh yes, 13th Warrior, baby.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting. Have we really talked about the 13th Warrior?
We've mentioned it several times. It is one of those things that you and I both have a fondness for that movie.
I listen. So for those who don't know, the 13th Warrior came out in 1999, I believe.
Based on Eaters of the Dead,
which is actually one of the more interesting Michael Crichton books. So the idea was that Michael Crichton wrote a book. Eaters of the Dead came out in 1976, right after Crichton quit practicing medicine. For those who don't know, Michael Crichton was a medical doctor who wrote under a pseudonym for his first 3 books,
and created ER.
Yeah, and he also created ER,
which a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
He made George Clooney.
He made
Michael Crichton Jurassic Parked George Clooney.
What's more important? Did he made George Clooney or made Noah Wyle?
He's I think he made George Clooney.
I'm just joking.
I don't think Noah Wyle got made yet. He's still waiting.
Next on the next episode of How to Get Made, Noah Wyle.
Poor Noah.
But Noah. But Noah. But I didn't mean to do that. Pun not intended there. But Crichton wrote the entire book as if it was a lost Viking text. So it required like footnotes and translations and all sorts of
It was essentially his sort of version of Beowulf.
So it was basically a more accurate, like a more historically accurate version of Beowulf. They took all the magic out of it.
A little more grounded.
A little more grounded, took all the magical elements out of the Beowulf legend and wrote the book. And it's a really interesting, it's a really great book because it's so immersive in its language and how it's written and everything along those lines. He did a lot of work on it, it's really interesting. The movie was almost unanimously first off, it tanked at the box office. It's still actually considered one of the biggest flops of all time because it cost like $160 million to make and it only made like 50 at the box office. John McTiernan directed it and then got fired from his own movie. Michael Crichton had to shoot all of the reshoots. It was so bad, like considered so bad when it was first released that Omar Sharif retired after the movie came out because he said, I don't want to do any movies with directors who have no idea what's going on. I'm assuming he's talking about Michael Crichton, who had not directed the movie, I think, since Coma in like 1980, which is still funny because Crichton did direct the movie Coma with Michael Douglas. But yeah, I thought that was very funny that Omar Sharif temporarily retired. He came back like 3 years later and was finally in something again. But however, if you watch the movie, it's not bad. It's good.
So it was one of those that was on rotation on like HBO when we were in college,
right?
In like 99, 2000. So Casey, who may be listening to this episode, we watched that movie like a lot.
Sure.
Like I've seen that movie many times, and we just had like a fondness for it. It was the same thing. It's one of those movies, especially when you've lowered your expectations based on like, what the fuck is this? It's Antonio Banderas, and they're all speaking different languages.
Antonio Banderas and Vikings.
Yes, he's playing someone named Abed Ibn Fadlan. Like, it's a little strange. Like there's a lot of weird things going on.
For those that don't know about the actual story of the 13th Warrior, it involves basically a guy who had sex with a nobleman's wife in like Egypt or something like that, or somewhere around there, Pakistan, who knows? Anyways, it was back in a long time ago, and so he's turned into like he doesn't want to be, but he's turned into like an emissary or basically like a foreign diplomat.
Yes.
Because the nobleman wants to send him far, far away, so he gets sent north.
There's a little Lawrence of Arabia in it, oddly enough, not just Omar Sharif.
Right, exactly.
maybe he was like pitched this movie as like, oh, this is going to be another Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah,
and he gets
right.
there and it's Michael Crichton. Like, I don't know what
I have no idea. I haven't directed a movie in 25 years.
I'm a terrible director.
I'm a terrible director. But anyways, yeah. So he gets attacked and then by like some wild tribe or whatever, and then gets saved by Vikings essentially, and so he becomes friends with them, and then ends up being the Antonio Banderas character ends up being a guest of the king, and then they get a request to go north and help protect this land from these from a magical being or whatever, a group of being. I think they're like Wendels or something like that.
That sounds familiar. Yes.
Yeah, that are attacking and killing everybody at this place, and so their job is to go up there. And of course, it's not magic; it's just people. They're dressed up as bears, but
it's a little of the Village. Prior to the Village.
Prior to the Village. M. Night Shyamalan watched it and was like,
yes,
that's it. I see it now. What a twist.
He's like, how do I steal from this movie? Oh, I'm going to tank it, and then no one will see it, and then I can steal this whole bit.
But no, I think it's a really fun movie, and it really it has the like what you were talking about, Matt. It has sort of the uncharacteristic, like the reluctant hero, because Antonio Banderas doesn't want to be there, but he has to kind of find his gumption and find his own his own courage to join the Vikings in the fight. There's also got a bunch of, like, I still remember, I haven't seen the movie in years, and I'm interested in kind of almost revisiting it at some point soon. But I remember the scene. There was a scene where two of the Vikings have a disagreement, so they decide to fight to the death. And one guy is just this hulking, huge, strong dude, and he's just beating the shit out of the other guy. Who's this, like, svelte, obviously very fit, but svelte guy, and he's just breathing hard and just whatever. And then it turns out that the whole thing was a ruse, and the guy goes in for the kill shot, and he just swings right around him and kills him, and then just walks away like nothing happened. And I just remember seeing that scene, was just like, oh, that's badass. Like, what a cool. I just ruined it for anybody who hasn't seen the 13th Warrior.
Well, listen.
Hey, listen, tune in on HBO 2 at 3 a.m. You're gonna see the 13th Warrior. So it's worth a movie.
So kind of switching, because I want to switch and get over to kind of one of the other subgenres here on it. But I am a big fan of the kind of creature legend as well.
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch is number one on my list.
You want to talk about Harry and the Hendersons?
I 100% want to talk about Harry and the Hendersons. It's right there in front of me on my screen. Yes, I mean, well, we reviewed on the show The Man Who Killed Hitler and then Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I always get the order of the two incorrect in my head. But there are a lot of good Sasquatch movies, but the best is very clearly Harry and the Hendersons.
I mean, there are definitely a lot of Sasquatch movies.
There's Sasquatch Hunter, which I somehow own on DVD. I don't know who bought that for me, but it was not me. But yeah, I think that, and it's interesting because there are certain movies that I feel lean into kind of this legend idea, and I think Bigfoot works, but then there are also just fantastical creatures that don't necessarily kind of fall within this. And I was kind of curious, like, do you think something like Splash is a legend film because it's this mythical creature?
I think it's close enough.
It's
Yeah, I think it's close enough. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a myth. It's myth and legend is kind of a same.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's really interesting is you look at the Universal Monsters series, and almost all of those, save for one, are very much legend ideas of, I mean, like werewolves, Dracula, which is historical as well.
Lycanthropy,
yes.
and the vampire thing,
and the mummy is is somewhat historical as well. But then you have Frankenstein, who I don't consider
that's
myth, because that's an actual book on there. But it is kind of interesting that there's a whole series of movies that were very popular in the 40s and 50s, and then kind of they go cyclical as well. As every so often Universal tries to relaunch their Universal Monsters, and they've done a terrible job on that. But yeah, I've always had a fondness for the creatures, and one that Ben and I saw together that unfortunately I kind of want to revisit it, because I feel like maybe, I don't know, I wanted to like, I think we both wanted to like it more than we did, which was Krampus.
See, I saw it again and I like it a lot more.
I need to watch it again, because I just remember feeling
let down.
It took the wind out of my sails, and maybe it's just Luke Stevens and his like giant thing of popcorn that was there with us.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say actually. But I have seen it since then, and it holds up way better than I remembered, and it's much better than I remembered. I
will say, I also always I do appreciate when they do the Krampus house at Halloween Horror Nights, which is always fun times.
Yeah, but yeah, so I thought Krampus was pretty fun. But yeah, obviously a good legend.
Yeah, and Krampus is a really interesting one as well, because you've got just the bare bones of a legend. You just know this idea that there is this creature that is sort of the anti-Santa Claus, but they're really creating their own in that film, their own mythology around it. And I think that is very interesting to see, because there's lots of fantasy movies, and there are things like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, which are drawing on hundreds upon hundreds of different myths and stories and things like that. But I do like when someone takes kind of just a single thing. And one of my favorites that I put on here that kind of falls in the gods and Bible category is Dogma, which I think is a really I like what Dogma does, because Dogma very much is referential to the Bible and everything that's going on, but he's building a whole mythology in there with things like Metatron, which is sort of a thing known in the Bible, but not really, and the Golgothon, which is not a thing that exists, that he's made up these things.
Is that the ship monster?
Yeah, it's basically the hill. The Golgotha was the hill where they crucified people and they would evacuate their bowels. So Kevin Smith came up with the idea that all of that evacuation became this evil monster called the Golgothan, which is, I mean, it's fucking crazy shit, literally. But I like those big swings of taking the bones of the Bible. We're adding Rufus, who's the 13th apostle that no one knows about. Like, all of these things that are building off of a very well-known, for lack of better words, story. This is a very blasphemous podcast, but I think that's when movies do things really well. I think that's a great use of the idea of legend in movies. Yeah,
absolutely. I have a really funny one also, because I know we're not, and at least I'm not, super well versed in Far Eastern culture and a lot of the legends there. But I think there's a really interesting one from India that I think that is kind of repurposed a lot through popular culture, which is the Bhagavad Gita, which is the story or the book where
is that the Baba Yaga? No, that is a good myth. The Baba Yaga.
Yeah, right. No. The Bhagavad Gita is where the warrior Arjuna is supposed to go fight, because he's supposed to be this great warrior, but loses his ability, just doesn't understand how to fight anymore, feels like he can't fight, so he's visited by like a benevolent entity called the Bhagavan, who essentially teaches him how to fight again so he can become this great warrior and become whatever. So if that sounds familiar, now listen to this. This is 100%. It's Arjuna Bhagavan. So imagine there's a golfer named Ranarjuna that can't play golf anymore because he has a problem, and he's visited by a guy named Bhagavan Bagger Vance.
Oh, wow. The literal legend of Bagger Vance
is based on an Indian legend. Isn't that crazy?
That's the weirdest. It's the weirdest.
The author of the book straight up basically said, no, it's just it's an American interpretation of this Indian legend, but with golf.
Huh. I mean, I like the Bagger Vance is a terrible movie, but it's
a better
garbage
book.
It is a garbage movie.
It's not a good movie. It's not a good movie. It's got the magical Negro in it.
It is a problematic, terrible movie. But in my head, I'm just thinking, like, I wish they would use that.
I have a soft
tale for something good.
I have a soft spot for it just because it was filmed in Jekyll Island, Georgia, and it's pretty, like, it's Robert Redford.
Sure.
It definitely doesn't age well, and it's not, I know Spike Lee has said a bunch of bad things about that movie just because of, like I said, the magical Negro stigma thing.
Well, and it's funny because we've brought this up. I forget it each time we've somehow talked about this movie multiple times on the air.
Really?
We have, because Jekyll Island, the business fraternity that my roommates were in. We went to a thing on Jekyll Island the week after it was filming there. So they had all this shit in the lobby of, like, you might see, like, Will Smith or Matt Damon or Charlize Theron.
That does ring a bell.
Any of them there, but I did then watch the movie, and I want my money back. It's not great.
Yeah, it's not great. But anyways, I do think, because you've seen still that story, I just think it's interesting because they literally took the names, like Arjuna. Arjuna is the name of the actual warrior, and it's Ranarjuna, like Arjuna, in Bagger Vance. It's just kind of funny.
His name
Bhagavan
is Bill.
and Bagger Vance.
Bill's above.
I wonder where this one's going. He lives in Hell's Kitchen.
Oh shit!
He's the bad guy on season 4 of Daredevil.
Just coming up with the names in that book, and someone did that. I was like, I am so fucking clever. You're fucking. Oh my god!
It just reminds us of coming up with the character names in Dream Riders. We're just like, look at how fucking clever we are.
Yeah, we still are.
This
clever.
guy's name is Truman. Truman, get it?
Oh, I wonder if he's gonna be a liar.
I wonder.
Well, reason 117 why Dream Riders is not on the air. But I will tell you what, every other fucking show that comes out is fucking Dream Riders, including, by the way, Loki. And every time I watch the behind the scenes on all of these things that came out instead of Dream Riders, they always have the guy's like, oh, I wanted to do The Office. And so we went to like things that were like big influences on us. Defending Your Life. Fucking Good Place.
Right, yeah.
Like Defending Your Life. I'm like, yes, I get it. I had the idea well before all of you.
Yeah, it's true. I know that you mentioned one of the subset categories was like urban legends.
Sure.
So obviously you've got like the scary ones, like Mothman and La Llorona, Candyman,
which
the Slender Man.
We saw a preview for the new Candyman tonight, which I thought looked fucking good. Interesting.
There's some. I think that Jordan Peele is a producer on it, and it's they got some interesting talent.
I love. I mean, the Candyman legend is fucking just. It's one of those great, just fucking just creepy shit things.
Every single time, like I want the guy from Willy Wonka to pop out of the background and just be like, the Candyman can.
And then he gets killed by
the
bees.
Candyman can, because he mixes it with blades and makes...
Don't you do it. On the urban legend, I mean, we've talked about Blair Witch Project, which I think does it great. There's one I do want to mention because it is one of our favorite guests on the show, one of their favorite movies, which is Dead Man on Campus, which literally was a movie based around a urban legend of the idea that if your roommate commits suicide, you get a free pass for classes for the you automatically pass all of your classes. So weird fucking thing, but apparently it was some like supposed thing that existed at some school somewhere, and I thought that deserved to show up.
Isn't Dead Man on Campus? I got some beers.
Let's drink them. That Greg Kline's one of his favorite drinking movies is Dead Man on Campus, so I had to bring it up on here. And I think also one that does a great job of it is an anthology, which is the VHS series. I think does a great job with kind of urban legend tales of.
The first one's actually, speaking of legends, like the very first VHS has the succubus legend portion in it, which is one of the more effective segments.
I love it. The last shot of that one is just fucking great.
Yeah, yeah. For those who don't know, VHS is an anthology of short horror films, but there's a good. That's a good legend one. A good little legend short film.
Yeah, and I've always been a sucker for the anthology things, especially when and I always love that they're always tied together with the most like tenuous frame story because they can never really figure out a great way to get to all of the things. But I always like watching them try. It's a thing that it tickles me just a little bit. So. On the kind of tie-in towards the end of these here, because fairy tales is really tricky because there are a lot of fairy tales that are rooted in. What do you do? Why are you like? What are you thinking? What's going on in that brain of yours right now? Ben is just like the cat that ate the canary over there. I was so excited about something.
Do you have the no one knows?
I do. There we go.
Because it's just another fairy tale.
Oh, fuck me. Ben couldn't contain literally his hand, his mouth just wanted to get that one out. But yeah, I mean, there are a gazillion fairy tales, but I think there are certain ones that fit more into the legend thing, stuff like, especially like Aladdin is kind of rooted in more.
Well, I mean, Arabian Nights in and of itself is kind of I think that's kind of the translation / updating of a lot of basically Persian legends. Yeah. So I mean that's in and of itself kind of.
And I don't know well, I guess so. Tarzan's Rudyard Kipling
that's a book.
That's book. So that doesn't count now. So I was kind of curious. And the only other one I had in here that I kind of added also is
I mean, like then you have like the the books that are kind of based on legend, like for example, Moby Dick is kind of like that's a well-worn tale, like the uncatchable whale that sinks boats and is a demon at sea and that type of thing, or the Goliath of the ocean. I mean that's a legend that was essentially just kind of crystallized in Moby Dick, and so now we have Moby Dick as like the even though that's a book, it's still an iteration of an ancient legend.
I mean, and I think similar to Robin Hood, you've got the Bible. You mentioned like Goliath, and the Bible is responsible for all manner of myths and stories that have arisen out of things that are based on those. I mean, look at somebody like Noah. Noah's the reluctant hero's journey. I mean, essentially that's almost the inception of that. The other kind of sort of subcategory here that's interesting to me is anything that's Christmas related. That's, because I mean, you've got stuff like Santa Claus, which is this mythical creature, or anything or something like Elf, which is it is weird to call Santa Claus a mythical creature. I'm sorry, but he's a mythical creature. He's a weirdo that lives up with a bunch of elves that he like makes do like labor for him and his poor wife.
Free labor.
His fucking poor wife who has a penis. A lot of people don't know that. That's a little known part of the it's the legend of Mrs. Claus. She has a dick. It's no. I think something like Elf feels to me like a legend kind of myth movie of this idea of kind of the elves and Santa and all of these things, and you have this one character who's doesn't belong and the fish out of water kind of thing.
Oh, but Elf is nothing compared to the recent, Disney film Noel. Jesus Christ!
I have still yet to watch it. But
yeah,
I do want to watch it.
It's so bad.
I want to believe that it's. I think I've just held off on watching it because I know it is going to be bad, and in my head I'm just pretending it's good.
It might be worth it for the hate watch.
It's I
mean, Bill Hader is next in line. Just so you don't, not to spoil anything, Bill Hader is next in line to become Santa Claus, but he really sucks at it, so he leaves to go be a yoga instructor. A hot yoga instructor because he hates cold weather.
I have shared this on the air before, but it is still one of my favorite anecdotes about that movie, which was that it was originally offered to Josh Gad, and Josh Gad was hanging out with Bill Hader at a party, and he was like, Bill, why did you do that? I passed on this movie. I do anything. And Bill's just mouthed the words divorce.
Yeah.
That's the most true thing anyone's ever said.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of ones I think that we've, there's a lot of the Alexander the Great and Troy, the Wrath of the Titans. There's a lot of that stuff. The only other one I do want to draw attention to, which is kind of funny because there was a very much of a feel for this movie to me in what we watched tonight, which is Time Bandits. Which is really that Gilliam's kind of Gilliam's done a lot of very kind of mythical ideas. Which
he's done an Arthur movie.
Yeah, I that was also kept cracking me up because I kept thinking about like how Gilliam. I was feeling I'm like, oh shit,
it's only a model.
Yeah, I was like, oh, maybe he'll maybe one day he'll do. Oh yeah, he's done one. He's done maybe the biggest one. Which is also funny that we didn't really cover the
Monty Python
and the Holy Grail. I was going to call it Spamalot, which is the musical version of it. But yeah, I think when you get to the point of them, when you get to someone doing a parody of it, that your legend has made it, which is why you've got a Mel Brooks Robin Hood movie and you've got a Monty Python King Arthur movie.
There you go.
But yeah, and we didn't talk about the one movie that when Ben originally pitched this idea, he's like, oh, we should do a podcast on legends. And then you're like, just the Ridley Scott film Legend. Only talk about that.
No, Matt, you misunderstood. Legends of the Fall.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Brad Pitt.
I am also a little upset with myself that I did not pull one audio clip of Neil Patrick Harris saying legendary.
Hey, listen. We've got a double dose of Will Smith. Legend of Bagger Vance and I am Legend.
This is right.
Yeah. So
well, Poor Will Smith.
So many legends.
Neither.
So many legends, so little time.
That's true. That's true. Well, we'll do a follow up, or we won't. We'll just cover these movies and say we're just going to keep doing podcasts about the 13th Warrior and Legend of Bagger Vance, and make people watch those two movies from almost the same era, 99, 2000.
While you're playing Legend of Zelda.
Whew. Well, that's going to tie it up for us. Thank you so much for listening to the New Wave podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.
Cheers.